To another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley, founder and owner of GC Realty. Mark, I'm sorry I missed you last night. I was not able to attend John Warren's meetup. Sounds like it was a good time, though.
Yeah, no, I was expecting, a lot of times you meet, as much as we hang out, we don't communicate. So I thought maybe I might even have seen you there, even though we talk about you being there. But yeah, so you were missed for sure.
There was a 1 week where there was like a Cubs game on a Tuesday and a Sox game on a Thursday. We went to both of them, not with each other, and then didn't figure it out till Friday.
Yep, I know, it's hilarious. It's a small world.
And talked 7 times in between that.
Yes, we recorded 3 episodes that week. That's hilarious. But yeah, John's it's his weekly or his monthly meetup, which is usually the last Tuesday of the month. He's actually, the cool thing is he is joining forces with MBOA. I think their new name is going to be West Suburban Building Owners Group. But last time was great. Roman Vieira was there, and there was just a whole bunch of good vibes in the air around them joining forces as the first suburban branch of the MBOA.
Exciting stuff here. I got to feel like we were a little part of that connection, no?
Yeah, I think so. They called us out on in the middle of the show, the meetup. They called us about the podcast, so it was pretty cool. So we got some recognition in the middle of that. So I love that.
Very good. And this is your public service announcement. If you're not getting out to meetups, do it. We have them on the website. You can find them on Bigger Pockets, but we have the ones specific to Chicago here. Regardless, they're on Meetup. Regardless, get out there and get exposure. Get in front of the people that you want to be. So let's jump in here, Mark. What's our housing provider tip of the week?
All right, housing provider tip of the week is the cool thing about things that are changing. There's different ways to get things done, and with maintenance, you have a different approach to some things these days, where you can just simply get a water filter just delivered via Amazon to your tenant if your water filter goes out. Or last week, we had a tenant, she actually broke a shelf in a fridge, but instead of sending a tech out there or sending a repair guy, we found the model, we found it online, and we shipped it to her. So she did pay for that shelf. But nowadays, with all these different services out there, whether it be delivering something maintenance wise, or, we use always Roadie, which is like a sub of UPS. We use them to just run and put lock boxes up for us on stuff, where they will deliver keys to somebody that's locked out, and it costs us $35 for us to send in a vendor there. So there's a lot of different things out there, especially that will kind of either save you costs or save costs that you have to pass on to your tenant or your owners if you're a property manager, and just make sure you're always kind of looking at these new little trends that are out there.
Yeah, and just talk to other operators, right? Find out what they're doing. If you're stuck somewhere, just ask someone.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Returning guest here from all the way back from episode 32, which is funny. Back then, I did not know this guest. And since then, we've done multiple deals together and someone I would consider a friend. So we have the podcast to thank for that. But we're going to dive deep into Logan Square today. And with no one better else to do that than with our guest. He's a broker, entrepreneur, developer. He is a bowling alley owner. Owner and founder of the Logan Blahnik Group with Ad Properties. Without further ado, Luke Blahnik, welcome back, man.
Thanks, gentlemen. I appreciate you having me back. This has been a pleasure to both be on the podcast and to listen and enjoy it. You guys do great work. I really appreciate it.
We're excited to have you. I think last time we had you was in the heart of COVID. You had a scarf on your face, hidden in a closet somewhere. We're a little more buttoned up here. We're ready to go. All right, so Luke, we're going to talk about Logan. It's so diverse. It's geographically, it's funny because it butts up, to Hermosa on the west, Bucktown to the east, Avondale to the north, Humboldt to the south. A lot of gentrification, gets thrown around with Logan. Can you talk to us about that a little bit and just take us almost through these different areas? Let's start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a huge neighborhood. So Logan Square, just talking about kind of east-west boundaries, we've got Western Avenue on the east side, all the way to Pulaski on the west side. And then you've got Diversey on the north side of the neighborhood and the 606 Trail on the south side. So it's over 2 miles wide, and it's over a mile north to south. So you've got this massive neighborhood that's more than 2 square miles. So within the neighborhood are different pockets and areas. And yeah, we've seen growth happen interestingly in Logan Square. And typically in Chicago, when you see a neighborhood gentrify or grow, typically happens south to north and east to west, speaking specifically kind of to the north side or northwest side. And Logan bucked that trend. I think that you've got in the heart of the neighborhood, the Boulevard system, which are these tree-lined streets that were built 100 plus years ago, and they were meant for weekend horse and carriage rides. Beautiful gray stones, really, really wide blocks with awesome old growth trees. And they've been really nicely preserved for the entirety of their existence. And so a lot of the growth in the neighborhood has happened around those boulevards. And those boulevards have always been desired properties and places to live. And then you've got also some interesting factors. You've got the blue line running kind of at a diagonal right through the middle of the neighborhood. And you've got the Kennedy Expressway, 9094, running through the neighborhood as well. And so instead of the neighborhood growing east to west like everyone expected it to, the neighborhood really, a lot of the recent growth and gentrification and building in the neighborhood has happened starting around those boulevards, branching out from those boulevards, and now kind of going down Milwaukee Avenue and west towards Hermosa in the neighborhood.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of those pockets there. And I know you said diversity in north. We definitely, not the project on Richmond we're doing now. I remember that first Richmond one that was north and a little north of there. We snuck that into Logan. We said that's close enough from a broker standpoint.
Interestingly enough, a neighborhood that's already really big gets even bigger when brokers start to get busy and call things that aren't that neighborhood. So you've got Avondale, the 2800 through the 3100 blocks of north that everyone starts calling Logan. And you're seeing that happen kind of on the west side as well. Bucktown did it back in the day, famously. West Bucktown appeared one day in real estate listings, and it was totally and still is Humboldt Park, but everyone called it West Bucktown. So so the neighborhood continues to grow. I mean, jumping into it, I think last time we were on the podcast, we talked about the blocks surrounding the boulevards. You've got some beautiful streets north and south of Logan Boulevard. Mozart, Richmond, Troy, Albany, which just have incredible housing stock, and they're built on wider than average lots. The typical lot in Chicago is 25 feet wide, and most of these lots are 30, 32 and a half, some 37 and a half foot wide lots. So you get really beautiful homes that have great airspace in between them. The blocks present extremely nicely, and they're just ultimately wonderfully walkable, gorgeous, desirable streets to live on. So I think that a lot of the change starts there. And what you're seeing
Luke, real quick though, just to dive in for 1 second, let's hit on that importance, because I remember when I started, I didn't give a damn about the 30-foot lot versus a 25-foot lot, which is something I've now I've completely changed my mindset. So can you just dive in a little bit there, like just how much more extra room you have? Why is that important? Why does that matter to an end buyer, whether you're doing a deconversion to a to $1 million flip or holding it as a 2-unit or 3-unit? Just the importance of 5 feet seems so little, but it's a huge difference.
Yeah. And the 5 feet doesn't translate to 5 feet more width in the home. Usually it's really kind of 1 to 2 feet more width that you get in the home. Typically a home might be 18 or 19 feet wide, and the homes on these 30-foot lots might be 20, sometimes 22 feet wide. And what does that mean to a developer, for example? So these homes that were originally built as we're using, let's say, a 2-flat gray stone, which is a limestone facade on a brick home, as an example. Those were built as 2 flats. They were built with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment upstairs, a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment on the first floor, and the basement generally was storage, was not in use. But the size of these homes translates extremely well to single-family homes. So when you go to gut a property like that, bedrooms matter, the size and location of them matter, getting a big primary bathroom and walk-in closets matters. And that extra 2 feet, once you sit down with an architect, starts to make all the difference in the world. You really end up with gracious layout, nice kind of corridors and bedroom locations. You can put bedrooms side by side a lot of times, like in the back of the house, where you could have 2 11-foot bedrooms sitting next to each other on a 22-foot wide house. And you just can't do that on a 25-foot lot. You also get a little more airspace between the homes. The backyard gets bigger, and the whole experience gets that much nicer. And it's what, 20% wider, a 30-foot lot, but the value is much more than that. A lot of times, you get more than 20% more for that home. When we counsel buyers and tell them what to look for when they're buying, a lot of times they're looking for inexpensive properties. We'll tell them, hey, just planning for the future. If you can buy a 30-foot wide lot, just buy that instead of a 25, because there's more you can do with that in the future. Even if you're buying it purely as a rental, 2-flat investment property today, you will find that it's probably going to bear more fruit in the future if it's on a wide lot.
Awesome. Thanks for diving in there. All right, so let's go. Where do you want to start geographically here?
Yeah, I mean, let's we're going to do this mentally without looking at a map or consulting one for the listeners, but let's start kind of in the middle of the neighborhood. Let's use.
Mark just said he's looking at one. Just
perfect. All right, fine.
We'll keep us on pace.
Pull your maps out, folks. So north-south in the neighborhood is Humboldt Boulevard that runs at 3000 West, and that tees into Logan Boulevard. Well, actually, it jots west at Palmer Square, turns into Kedzie Boulevard, and then attaches to Logan Boulevard. So we're kind of right in the middle of the neighborhood right now, geographically, maybe towards the north end of the middle of the neighborhood. These boulevards is where kind of it all begins. If you can be around those, we saw great single family home price growth. We continue to see it around those boulevards. Milwaukee Avenue is an angled street, and it runs right through the intersection of Kedzie Boulevard and Logan Boulevard. And that is Logan Square. It creates a little roundabout with a cute statue and a little park in the middle of it. So a lot of the growth starts there and just to the east of there. There's a Blue Line station there at Logan Square. There's another one a few blocks south at California. We've seen great growth of single family home pricing in those areas. When we talked last, a deconverted brick or graystone home that's a 5-bedroom, 3.5 bathroom home probably was selling for the $1.2 million to $1.5 million range. This is during COVID. Since then, the growth has been really strong, and I think now those homes are $1.5 million to $1.9 million for the end product. So, that's driven all prices up. The input, the 2-flat in its raw state has gone up in value. And the end home being more expensive is great for someone who owns one. It's arguably good for the neighborhood. It's good for developers, but not everyone can buy one. And so when you get prices that get that high, where you need big money or a trust fund or some kind of outside influence bringing money to the table, you see people needing to go and look elsewhere to live. So let's go west from the boulevards. Just west of the boulevards, you've got Spalding and Sawyer Streets, which are really great streets. They always have been. And those have seen a lot of growth in the last few years, all the way down to the 606 trail. Spalding and Sawyer have been very popular. West of that is Kimball. Keep going west, you get into Drake, Bernard, St. Louis, also really nice blocks. Some of the streets have, Bernard, for example, has these old Victorian Queen Anne style homes. It's aligned with them. It absolutely feels totally out of place and marvelous, and they're well cared for and it's historic. So some really cool stuff happening further west than people generally think. As a broker, we get people in the car, we take them over there and show them these neighborhoods that they've never been in before, or these streets that they never even knew about. And their eyes open up and they want to be on those blocks. And so that's driven a lot of the Western movement of the neighborhood. You can keep going Central Park and all the way beyond, all the way over to Pulaski. And we still see some great growth over there. Less single family conversions, more 2-flats still happening over there, but great neighborhood, great blocks. Nice area. Logan Boulevard only runs to Kedzie. So once you go west of the boulevard, as you know, Tom, that turns into Wrightwood Avenue, and Wrightwood then runs all the way to Pulaski over there. You did a great rehab on Wrightwood last year.
We did, right near the mayor's house there.
Yeah,
if you're going down Wrightwood, you see 5,000 police cars. There's not a crime there. That just means Lori's getting out of the house.
It's right there, 1 block west of you.
All right, so hold on, like Luke, you brought we're talking a lot here, so let's slow down for 1 second. If I'm someone looking, hey, I want to buy I want to invest, I want to know where I'm going to have rock solid renters, the best bang for my buck.
Mhm.
Maybe I can't afford to be right on the boulevard, right? You know, at that price per unit gets pretty, it's steep over there. What are your thoughts? Because a lot of times we'll see an OM and it'll say like, you know, Logan Square, and like you're at Pulaski and call it diversity, right? You're
Right.
You might technically be in there, but it's a whole different feel and a whole different vibe.
Mhm.
So a lot of our listeners probably want to know about, hey, what is that like over there, right? Like what is my type of tenant? Is that really Logan Square? Is it a whole different area? Let's dive in for a second.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in that the areas we've focused on so far around the boulevards don't make sense generally or pencil out as investment properties. You know, these are owners that want to live there. You're not considering kind of what the cash flow is. There is no model that you're applying to it. It is simply, I want to live here, and this is how much I'm going to pay for it. So you're right. You've got to go into different parts of the neighborhood. You know, the housing stock changes as you start to go west. You start to see more frame housing, and as you start to go south in the neighborhood, you start to see more frame as well. So that can lead to lower acquisition prices for multifamily. I've never found trouble finding renters anywhere in Logan Square. I think the neighborhood is just popular and people want to live there. But it is very different kind of at the different corners. The northwest corner, like you talked about, Diversey and Pulaski. You've got some industrial stuff happening over there, a bunch of kind of larger commercial stuff. I think Hooters just opened a place called Hoots up there. There's a Binny's Beverage Depot and a big grocery store. And Pulaski is quite commercial. You're getting further from the train as you go west into the neighborhood as well, which does affect some renters' decisions on whether they want to live somewhere. Because if they've got to hoof it 1.5 miles to get to the train, they're not going to do it. They're going to choose somewhere closer to the train. So because of that, a lot of people have gone to Avondale, where you've got the train that continues to run through the neighborhood, kind of at that northwest trajectory. So that's the northwest side, but it's very nice. There's some cool developers doing some interesting stuff. Randquist did a really nice development on the northwest side of the neighborhood that is some 3-story townhomes, slab on grade, all stacked next to each other, that sold very well. So there are opportunities in that area that you're going to pay a little bit less for. The most inexpensive corner of the neighborhood, if we're looking for lowest acquisition, still being able to use Logan Square as an address, is going to be directly south of that, the southwest corner of the neighborhood, which would be the 606 Trail. So that's Bloomingdale, 1800 North, and Pulaski. You're going to find less expensive housing. A lot of the blocks have not really been rehabbed or flipped or touched or perturbed in that way, but much lower acquisition price and easier to get in to the neighborhood if you want the address and you want to be able to say you're in there.
And what about, crystal ball out here? Do you feel there's a big upside there? Like, do you feel this will, going back to how things usually push east to west, and it's been a little different in Logan, do you see that, that little bit of a gamble there paying off?
Yeah, it's hard because you're further from the public transportation lines that I think are meaningful and remain meaningful to our tenants. A lot of people travel downtown, maybe less often than they used to for work. Many are remote now, so they're agnostic to how close they are to a train. But I think largely still matters. Getting on the highway matters. So if someone gave me a big bag of money and said, go buy a bunch of buildings that are going to do well over the next few years or decades, I would probably try to track closer to the blue line and go up into Avondale, then go to the far southwest corner of Logan Square just to say it's still Logan Square. That doesn't take away anything from the neighborhood. It's still a fantastic neighborhood. It's just, I don't think that's where the explosive growth is going to happen. Something worth talking about too is around the 606, there's been aldermanic driven movement to slow down gentrification. And the way they've chosen to do that is through ordinance. And they've got this ordinance called the Predominance of the Block Ordinance.
Got it. So wait, hold on. Before we jump in there, though, let's give us the little history of the 606. Right? Not everyone's super familiar with it. Like, let's take a step back. Just the development of it, what it's meant to the community. Let's get a little context here before jumping in.
So we've got an abandoned train line that ran above grade. Think of like how the CTA tracks run at the second story of houses, sort of height, call it 15, 20 feet up in the air. And this train line ran from, I believe, all the way, west, I don't know, California, through the city, into the city. And the train line stopped being used, was kind of decommissioned from what I understand in the 90s, early 2000s, and then was kind of really sparsely used after that. So the city saw an opportunity to turn this straight line that trains ran on, that runs from Ashland all the way west to right around Central Park, St. Louis, I think is the trailhead, Wandale maybe actually. And they turned it into a public park. It took years and years and years to happen. There was tons of speculation about whether it ever would happen. Finally, the city got it together. They created a running, biking trail that runs east to west through several neighborhoods. So you've got it almost touching the new Lincoln Yards development, and now it's going to get continued through Lincoln Yards. And then it runs all the way through the heart of Bucktown, through Logan Square, and through close to Hermosa, with Humboldt Park on the south side of it, pretty much the entire way. So you've got, it's vibrant, it's alive, it's beautiful. They did a great job with it. Some people use it every single day. You see runners up there, little kids biking. My kid learned how to ride a bike on the 606 trail, and it's great. But it kind of acted like this needle in a way that injected growth into these neighborhoods, or at least that's the way that people perceived it. And so then there was a lot of conversation surrounding, what is this? Is it good for a community? Is it bad? And how do we preserve housing around it? So that's where some of these ordinances have come into place surrounding it to try to slow growth around the 606 trail.
Got it. All right. So now that we have the context, let's talk about that ordinance so our people understand, because we agree, like, affordability is a huge issue here in Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. Even as developers, like, we want to do things, but there is a responsibility to keep these neighborhoods vibrant and not just come in and build a bunch of cookie cutter crap, for lack of better words. So right. let's talk about the ordinance.
Yeah. So, the nature of the ordinance was to try to stop two flats or slow them down from being deconverted to single family homes. The thought was that we are losing density in this neighborhood by taking a two flat that, let's say, two families live in, or maybe a third family lives in, the illegal garden unit, and you turn it into a single family home, and now you've got 4 people living in this house that 16 people used to occupy. So you've lost density, you've lost housing for people, and presumably you've lost affordability of housing, because this single unit has to replace 3 units, and it's going to be much, much more expensive once you're done building it. So the ordinance goes into effect, and what it says basically is from North Avenue, which is 2 blocks south of the 606, to Armitage, 2 blocks north, and from roughly Western to Pulaski and beyond into Hermosa, if you tear down a building, you pay a fee to tear it down, $15,000 roughly for a 2 flat, and up higher for 3 and 4 flats and bigger. And then you have to replace it in line with the character of the block. So if the block, your side of the block, not the other side of the street, is mostly, meaning more than 50%, multifamily, 2 flat, 3 flat courtyard, you have to put minimum 2 units back on that lot. So you can no longer build a single family home, except with a couple blocks that are more single families than 2 flats. Almost all the blocks now, you cannot build a single family home on those blocks. So, what happens next? And I think this was maybe a year and a half ago, I'm guessing, that this ordinance went into effect. So what happened first is nothing, right? No one bought anything, no one built anything. And a lot of people gripe that values fell on those homes. People that maybe wanted to sell can't, because developers don't want to buy those homes because they don't know what it means. It's just, when there's the question, people just slow down and they just avoid the area. They'll go somewhere else. Now you're seeing a little bit of development, but not as much. I mean, it has been effective in slowing down single family homes around that neighborhood. or within the boundaries of the ordinance. We have seen some developers build now 2 flats. So let's say you could build a duplex up that might look like an owner's unit with a rental unit below it, or you could do 2 condos. And we've seen a few that are pretty interesting, that look nice. Politically, like, do I think it's achieving what they wanted it to achieve? No, I think the way to do so is to allow people to build 3 flats everywhere in the whole city. This R3 zoning, which is the majority of the areas we work in, specifies that if on a typical single family lot, you can only build on a typical Chicago lot, you can only build a single family home, which is, you're replacing 2 flats and 3 flats and 4 flats, and all you can build is single family homes. And then to turn and say that's evil or that's bad inherently,
when it's the only thing that zoning allows you to do, it's insane.
You can rehab the existing building, or you can build a single family. That's it. And with zoning relief, widespread zoning relief, which has been discussed and contemplated, but not enacted in any way, I think you remove the necessity to do these like an ordinance like this, because if developers could build 3 and 4 flats, they would. And maybe those units still aren't affordable. Affordability is a whole nother discussion, but because new construction, it's just hard to build for low income without offsets or any kind of like government subsidies. It's hard to build a new construction home for a low income family, unless you're compelled to do so, or it's part of the deal you've made with the alderman. But anyway, so a bit of a tangent.
Well, I'll do a shameless plug for our zoning cheat sheet at straightupchicagoinvestor.com. You can download that. We're talking about zoning. But the question I have after listening to you talk about this is, where'd the push come from, and how long was that push for? Like, what was it? Was it the neighbors? Was it the aldermen? Was it
driven by
how
aldermen.
it got to the table to be voted on?
Yeah, like driven by aldermen who are responding to constituent needs, or at least the constituents that they believe will vote them back into office. So I think that you've seen a market change in a lot of areas on the Northwest side, where the aldermen are definitely pro affordable housing and pro protecting the residents and constituents of the neighborhood. And sometimes, it is hard to navigate that. But this was an aldermanic driven process that took years to enact, and was, I think, piloted, and now it's been fully codified. But it is something that will continue to evolve, I think. I think that what this is a testing ground for this kind of legislation. And then they're going to look at it in a few years and say, okay, it worked, or it didn't work for these reasons. Let's make these changes. And you'll probably see it in more places as we move on.
In that sliver of land from Armitage North, or the north-south streets, you said, was it people outside those blocks, or was it people within those blocks that were really pushing for it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think largely people feel like, hey, we got to do something to protect the entire neighborhood from going single family and becoming extremely expensive, and everyone gets displaced. Like, it's a real need. You're seeing it. Density just decreases. Commercial establishments stop opening because you just got less and less people living in neighborhoods. Like, I'm very pro density personally in that regard. But the entire zoning ordinance is counterintuitive to that. Like, it is supporting the growth of single family homes. And I'm not a historian. I don't know how or why R3 zoning was so largely applied to neighborhoods that don't look like R3 zoning districts, but that's what it is. And I think that broader change in that could probably bring about a lot of a large change. I was talking to Prashant, who you guys have had on the podcast before, the other day about affordable housing. And, he was saying, there is no such thing as affordable new construction housing. He's like, but the best way we could do it is if we could build 3 flats, we could have an owner's unit and 2 rental apartments above, and the house itself would not be inexpensive, but the rent would cover the housing payment. He's like, and that's the closest thing we can get to affordable housing. And I totally agree with him. And I hope we can do more of that in the future.
Prashant, episode 21.
Oh, look at that. Quick draw McGraw.
But it amazes me though, and I'll go on a quick rant here, is, these moves that government makes when, yes, they're trying to limit a 2-flat going to a single family, or call it 100 2-flats going to a single family. But just a couple blocks away across from the park in Humboldt Park on North Avenue or up and down Milwaukee, they're putting hundreds of condos in. That's going to offset some of that and not have to put so many controls in. So I don't know. I don't live in that neighborhood, so I have less to say about that. But the number wise, though, you're going to get it. And I feel we try to control things at all costs when some things are just going to naturally happen.
You're right. I mean, some of it's by right. So like there is more dense zoning, R5, for example, along the north side of the park on North Avenue, north side of Humboldt Park. And so you see some by right apartment buildings being built that are 5 stories tall and 30, 40, 50 unit buildings. But yeah, right now, the struggle that we have is that there's just, it's not sensible. A lot of times you have to go to the alderman, you're asking for special permission to build something in certain areas. And then you get all the public griping that there's aldermanic prerogative coming in here and they're being swayed or they're being influenced. And it's like, shouldn't there be a simpler system where we can just do away with that and have a more proactive and more dense zoning system that would just, we wouldn't have to worry so much about the single family home as the enemy.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And then, but the only devil's advocate I'll take is like the flip we did at Albany. That was R5. Like next door, they built a 5 unit in the middle of a block there. And that thing was so ugly. Like there's actually a rich guy on the block there who bought the house next door to him just so it wouldn't happen to him. Like he paid these $700,000 just to buy the 2 unit. He's like, it doesn't cash flow, it doesn't work, but now no one can build a 6 unit next to me and my kids are here.
Yeah,
right?
Like
there's the other side of it is like you build some monstrosities.
Yeah. Well, that's the street that's spot zoned R5, that 2400 block of Albany, for whatever reason, spot zoned R5. And you can build, like you said, they took a 2-flat and they added like 5 units to the backyard because the yards are really long there. Maybe that's R4 zoning on that one. But anyway, yeah, you're right. They built something totally out of character with the street. So there is no perfect answer here. I think it's more interesting though to examine what's happening and how it's influencing the growth. But there are opportunities around the 606 because I think developers have looked other directions. So now you've got homes sitting there that a lot of times won't sell. Maybe it's a tear down, for example, but no one wants to buy the tear down because they're going to have to pay the $15,000 to the city to tear it down. And they're going to have to build a 2-flat in its place. And their model isn't built for that. So now, we're sitting here trying to get creative going, okay, let's find a new model where we can build a 2-flat that makes sense financially and someone wants to live in, and you've got to think about things like appraisals and lending and, all of these things. But I think that there is a way to build one, but with that comes some great opportunity at the moment to buy stuff.
Nice. And we have Sterling Bay on the show in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk specifically about Lincoln Yards. And one of their main marketing points is that it's going to tie in with a 606. Is that good or is that bad for Logan as far as if it's going to continue to go further east over the river?
It's good if you own a home around the 606. I think that people are excited by it. To me, it's a really cool park at its essence. It's great. It's fun to exercise on and to be on and to hang out on. And the idea that it would connect to another neighborhood is that much more interesting. Like you always hear people saying, oh, it's used for nefarious purposes, or, oh, this is just going to be some elevated getaway track that someone's going to use to run away from the police when they commit a crime or something along those lines. And I think largely that's not been the effect of the 606. It's been a community amenity for everyone there. They took an old, decrepit, defunct piece of infrastructure and they turned it into a great park. And it's awesome. And so the idea that Sterling Bay is going to continue it, that's great. And if they somehow could get it all the way to the lake one day, or you come down off of it and you find a path to the lake, even better. It's good for the community. It's just a cool thing.
Cool. All right. So Luke, you have been in Logan for a long time, and it's obvious from talking to you. If our listeners never heard you before, you're just rattling off streets, side streets going west to east, just off the top of your head here. Why have you focused so much on Logan? Like, just taking a step back, like, why did you anchor here? Because this is years ago. Without right now, it's like it seems like an obvious choice, but 8 years ago, why are you like, this is where I want to be?
I landed here by accident. I was out of college looking for a cheap apartment, and we ended up in Logan Square, right on the Boulevard, right above the little bakery called La Boulangerie right now. And super lucky to have been here, knew a little bit about the neighborhood, but was excited to live in the neighborhood. So I think most of it is serendipity. Like, it just happened by accident. And we recognized, myself, my roommate at the time, my girlfriend, now my wife, and our 2 kids, recognized just like that it's a marvelous neighborhood with really cool people and great restaurants, great bars. It had, at the time, like a very, sort of cool, interesting, off the beaten path sort of vibe to it. Today, it feels much more mainstream. You've got, I think I just saw that Federale got a permit to build on Milwaukee Avenue, kind of kitty corner from Asterio, which is this cool Latin bar. So you've got a ton of continued kind of restaurant growth that has kept me here. I no longer live in Logan Square. We built a house in Humboldt Park through COVID, kind of. So we moved in last year and love it. We're on the Boulevard, so we're still kind of connected to the neighborhood, but we absolutely love it. But yeah, I think to your point, it's a great neighborhood that continues to evolve. People want to be here because of all of these gravitational forces attracting them: the transit, the housing stock, the really interesting bars and restaurants. And that has just kind of continued to feed itself and grow off of itself, and continues to do so. Is there a day when it's over, or like it's too cool? I mean, I don't know. Wicker Park felt a little like, I see Chase Bank is going into the corner where Tavern used to be, and there's a Yeti store where Double Door was. So it's like, you get Stan's Donuts though, and you can go get a thermos or a really good cooler. So I don't know. Is it over? Maybe. Does that happen to Logan from a commercial standpoint? Probably. I don't think there's any stopping that force. But for now, it remains like a really fun, cool place to live.
As a side note, one of the coolest debates or fights I found in the city was the fireman who owned the Double Door, who I just knew from a friend through softball. He's a firefighter. That landlord tenant fight that went on for years and was pretty public was you can look that one up. That's one of my favorite ones. Oh
yeah,
2 guys just saying F you to each other publicly, basically.
Yeah, the alderman and the owner, right? Fighting outside in the street. Yeah, it's a good one. It's on YouTube. Look it up.
All right, so you come to Logan, all these good things have happened. Here's what surprises me about Logan Square is like the prices you can get there. And when I mean that on the back end, like the prices are so high, they're higher than compared to somewhere like North Center, where you have like these schools like Bell and that are just, maybe I'm looking at this through like a father of 4 lens of just like, it shocks me that something in Logan goes for so much more than North Center. Right. Because, I guess what I'm getting at is the schools at Logan are evolving. So just talk to me about, is it just because of just the nightlife and all the other good things? Is that the obvious reason? And then let's talk about the schools, how they've evolved, and where do you think they'll be in 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. So as your address determines the public elementary school that your kids get to go to by right. And there's a guaranteed seat at your school. So if you buy a home within a great school district, like over in North Center, for example, Bell, Burley, Hamilton,
Coonley,
your Coonley, Blaine, your kid gets to go to this great elementary school, or at least the tests say it's great. So Logan Square has several elementary schools that are in the neighborhood. We talked about how big the neighborhood is, but yeah, you're right. The schools aren't to the same level that they are in North Center or Roscoe Village yet. The prices are higher over in Logan Square. So it is a bit of like a curiosity. What drives it? Well, I think like public schools aren't everything. Some people don't send their kids there. The other thing is that these metrics are lagging. I think the kids test twice in second and seventh grade or something like that. And that kind of determines the ranking of the public schools. And so a lot of people feel that the school will get better before anyone knows it's better. Brentano seems like an absolutely wonderful public school. Everyone speaks so highly of the principal and administration there. And a lot of people send their kids there. And that's the school district that primarily is around those really expensive homes that we talked about around the Boulevards. But I do think that like the cool factor has a lot to do with it. One, it's convenient. The train line is nice, the blue line, and the blocks are fantastic. And I think as a parent, sometimes you just look past the elementary school and you say, look, either that's a temporary condition or it's something that doesn't affect us so much that we're not going to just choose where we live based on that. So it is though different, because the schools are what drove a lot of those neighborhoods to really get expensive further east. And that's not why we got expensive further west. I think it is just because the blocks are really nice and people love the location and it's cool. And it's interesting to see millennials like voting with their pocketbooks or, with their wallets like that, or they're buying kind of just because it's relevant and interesting, but it's happening, and yeah, it's interesting.
That's a pretty good answer. Pretty good answer.
Well, I know just from the ones we've done, the buyers on our end have been, they fit the Logan Square, like just persona or profile, right? Just some very rich 35-year-old couple and, just want to be in a cool spot, right? Like that's like.
Hello, if you're watching. Yeah, we're going to talk about you now, but you're right. It's been childless couples who don't care at all about school districts, right? Like we don't even touch on it when we show the house, and they're going to grow into the neighborhood, and probably that problem will solve itself by the time it gets to them. So they're just not even looking at school district like so many people do or need to. Where we built, we knew that the public elementary school wasn't an option. So we tried to get into some private schools. We're fortunate in that we can pay for them. We didn't get into any of them because all the seats are full. And we applied to a bunch of CPS schools, and we were fortunate that we got into a really great CPS school, and our kids are both going to go there in Bucktown. So, some of it is you just got to kind of roll the dice, live where you want to live, and it'll work itself out. So.
Cool. All right. So we got the schools evolving. Let's talk about some of the new developments. Anyone who takes the blue line, let's start with the Congress Theater project, because that's one that's so obvious. You see it there. Yours truly drummed there about 15, 20 years ago. And, just a very cool venue that's just been dormant for, I don't know how long, at least a decade, right? It's been on commission for a while. Like, let's talk about what we got going on over there.
Yeah. So it's a, massive theater on Milwaukee Avenue that, like you said, we've all kind of came of age going to some concerts at the Congress that were, the place was a shithole, and it got shut down as a result of it. There's a bunch of apartments around it. They were trying to add a hotel to it for a number of years, but the building fell into disrepair, and a theater is just a really complicated thing to rehab and bring back to life. So there's been 2 attempts by 2 different developers to step in, purchase it, get assistance through the city, through people, whatever, to revive it. And both have ended up just catastrophes. They lost a ton of money. They, I don't know, what mechanisms they pulled if they went bankrupt or whatever, but both did not work out. So now a third group has it, Baum Revision, and they've got a big TIF grant from the city. And I think it's like a $70 million project. It's a 3,000 person theater with, I think, 20 apartments and a bunch of retail storefronts along Milwaukee. So that's kind of at the south end of the neighborhood. That's just north of Armitage on Milwaukee. That's going to be amazing when that's done. Just bring a ton of energy to the neighborhood.
Is it going to be a theater like the Riv, like the Vic? Is that the end game?
Yeah, I think I walked it when it was available. Yes, it is. It's a large company already owns it. AEG, I think, not Live Nation. And they're the ones behind it. And they're going to be the operator of the theater. So national acts, big shows, all those things that you can expect. So yeah, that's happening on Milwaukee. There's been some other growth on Fullerton Avenue, where the current alderman of the first ward, I think, in general, painting with a broad brush, trades low income units for density, saying, hey, build big buildings on these lots, give us some low income commitment to support some families that you're either displacing or are getting displaced from somewhere else in the neighborhood, and we'll let you build something big here. So saw a few that were zoned recently along Fullerton Avenue. I think that probably will continue. So you'll get some more infill. There was a large government-sponsored housing development right on the Logan Square Blue Line station that took place over the last 2 years that just has been occupied recently. Super controversial. Neighbors were mad. Some were totally supporting it. It was very interesting to watch it all go down. But it's an attractive building and it's full of people now. And so it adds more density to the neighborhood. I think it's a good thing to bring density. So yeah, continued growth though. And we'll see what happens in the future. It's the first ward makes up a lot of Logan Square. And this is a hotly contested aldermanic race that we're heading into. You've got the large ward that goes all the way into West Town. So you've got a bunch of
before you go forward, Luke, is this one also getting drastically realigned come next year? Like in Jeff Parker, ours is getting realigned pretty dramatically.
The answer is not a ton. It is, the lines are changing, but they're not changing, at least in Logan Square, a ton in the first ward. The neighborhoods feel like they're staying relatively stable. Some people moving into other neighboring wards, but no. But you've got, people just multiple people running from multiple parts of the neighborhood. You've got someone who is active within the Logan Square preservation, who's running for the aldermanic seat. The incumbent alderman is running. The previous alderman, who was before the incumbent alderman who got into some legal trouble, he's back, he's running. And then you've got someone whose dad used to write for the Chicago Tribune, who's running as well. So it's going to be an interesting race to watch. And ultimately, that will determine what happens with the built environment. Do more large developments get permitted, or is there a complete stoppage? And then people kind of leapfrog over to other neighborhoods and other wards, as we saw happen in Avondale, for example, during the last four years or so. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Man, so much good stuff. Mark, these are the episodes we're supposed to do, like get this deep into a neighborhood, as opposed to ask a broker what's Logan Square. Like, oh, that's pretty cool. Right? Like, going block by block. So Luke, really appreciate it. Anything else to add, Mark? Are we good to wrap here?
We're good to wrap.
Let's do it.
All right, Luke, what is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to become such an expert in such a niche neighborhood, and others wish they could?
Yeah, I mean, I work in this neighborhood and a lot of others on the north side, but I think getting granular with it, staying at it, just being consistent, learning every day, trying to stay involved and get to know people and meet people has been good for me, good for our business, and ultimately good for our clients. And so I look forward to continuing to do it. I'm not going anywhere. Hope to continue to broker in the neighborhood and to see it grow responsibly and still to be a great place to live in the future.
It might have been you that told me this, might have been someone else, but it was just someone said, just learn a block a day. You'll have a neighborhood done by the year, right? Just master the 2,600 block of whatever, like just one a day, and you will be a master of that neighborhood. So
it seems daunting at the beginning. You're right, but it does work, and you'll become super familiar. And these data points start to add up, and the picture starts to become like color, and you'll start to understand kind of what it all is. And so, yeah, I think that's great advice, Tom.
All right. So speaking of advice, what is one piece of advice you would tell someone that has yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Good one. Be really careful about MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. Try to buy something that's got somewhat updated MEPs. Let's call it 1960s or after. So you've got copper, HVAC, and a decent electrical distribution system, because you will lose your ass on trying to pay to update those if you don't know what you're doing. And then if you can, buy bricks and buy buildings with big bedrooms, but that's not always possible, and you can figure it out otherwise. But when it's available, buy a brick building for your first building.
MEPs, I love that. I got a new acronym. I've never approached it that way.
Trademark it.
Yep. All right, awesome. I'm curious. We should have listened to what the last answer was, but last time was during COVID. What do you do for fun now that we're not COVID?
Don't do anything. So we have 2 little kids at home, hang out with the family, try to soak that up as much as possible. COVID was a bummer for me. I love walking into a busy bar or a busy restaurant and like pushing my way up to the bar and having a drink and getting a table without a reservation. And we're still in like the hangover from COVID from that. You still have to have like a reservation to go to a popular restaurant. So I'm excited about the reemergence of that. If I can ever sneak out on a Friday or Saturday night, I go and I get like 3 or 4 bars and have 1 beer at each place. But I just love like seeing people out enjoying life and having fun. So that's what I do.
Very nice. All right. Give us a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners.
I've been getting into, on Instagram, I follow an account called Building Science Fight Club that talks a lot about insulation and wall assemblies and moisture and how it negatively affects the home. It's the most boring and mundane subject you could ever spend time on, but I find it super interesting. And there's a YouTube channel by a guy, Matt Rissinger, who builds custom homes in Austin, Texas, that a friend turned me on to. And it's just fantastic. The guy is an expert and spends so much time in the weeds, in the details. And I don't know, I just geek out around that stuff. So I think the more people can know, the better. So spend time on YouTube learning buildings. It's important.
All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Oh, great question. Gosh, I should have thought about these things. I'm going to be shameless and selfless. Anthony Flora, my business partner, turned 40 today. Him and I have worked together for several years. He is in many ways the opposite of me in that he is calm and thoughtful and measured, and is a fantastic resource for our clients. And I'm so lucky to have him as a partner. And I feel like my clients that I brought to the relationship are so lucky to have him as a resource now. So he's great. If anyone gets a chance to meet Anthony, you should sit down with Anthony. He's fantastic.
And Anthony, if you're listening, I texted you happy birthday before that plug there. It's 4:06 right now when we're recording this. So, all right, Luke, awesome episode. Thank you. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Yeah, like I love to know your stories and to help whenever I can. And I truly mean it. So if anyone is listening and I can be a resource, whether it be like a zoning issue or a building issue or whatever, you're not compelled to use me as a broker. If you just have a question, reach out. I gain from that as well, because I learn a ton by talking to you and knowing kind of what you have. So you can find us on Instagram. Our handle is Flora, Flora, and then Blahnik, my last name. Or you can find our contact information on there. Just reach out and we'll set something up.
Sounds good. We'll link to that in the show notes. And if you're in the area, if you're down in Avondale, go to Avondale Bowl. Support.
Would love to meet anybody for a drink at Avondale Bowl. Yeah.
Wait, can we take a 30-second detour? So, Luke, you put a mural. It's your building. You paid a local artist to put a lovely mural up on this building.
Yeah.
But for those who've been to the Avondale Bowl, they've seen it on the side there.
Yeah.
And now talk to us about the trouble you're getting in with the neighborhood.
We didn't get in trouble as much as so the corner was an old liquor store. My bowling alley's on the 2nd floor. So below it was an old liquor store that someone apparently had driven a truck through the windows like 20 years ago. So the owner put ugly block on the corner. And so we painted it. I had a friend of ours paint this really cool mural when we first started on the building, and the neighborhood like fell in love with the mural, and it kind of became like a piece of public art. So when it was coming down, there was like some serious outcry online about it and about gentrification and about, the evils of it. And I'm like, hey guys, like I was the one that put it there. It was just there to look pretty and I'm the one taking it down. Like, don't get too mad at me. But that didn't like work. People were still upset. But I understand. So we're going to put one back. We're going to paint another one on the building higher up this time. But yeah, it was funny. It was interesting to watch it happen, kind of watching the Facebook comments and then commenting and then seeing how people responded to those comments. It's funny.
That's awesome.
All right. We got a Chicago fact to wrap this. Mark, who are we playing for?
We are playing for Greg Walker, who bought a beanie just last week. So, Greg, if myself or Luke,
we haven't had that in a while.
This right, then you'll get a $50 gift card brought to you by Renovo.
All right. So we mentioned the Logan Square Park. So that's the circle where you got, Kedzie, Logan, Milwaukee, all coming together, that crazy circle there. That was referenced earlier in the show. On it, you got the column there with the eagle on top, and that was built in 1918. The reason that was built, and I'll give you multiple choice here. A, as a dedication to General John A. Logan. B, as a sign of respect for Memorial Day. C, to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Illinois as a state. Or D, to memorialize the Pullman strike.
What was A again?
We'll let Mark go first, and then Luke, you can chime in too. A was a dedication to General John A. Logan.
That seems too obvious. What was D?
D was to memorialize the Pullman strike.
I'll go C.
To celebrate the 100-year anniversary of Illinois. Luke,
No. B. I'm sorry. B.
Wait. You're going B? Where are you going here?
B.
Respect Memorial Day.
All right. A sign of respect for Memorial Day.
C.
Luke. C?
100-year anniversary.
I thought you would stump. I thought I'd stump you with this one. You got it. C.
Was it C? That seemed like just didn't make sense. All right.
Yeah. So Illinois became a state in 1818. Mark, do you know when Chicago became a city?
Is it 1851?
No, my son actually asked me this. It's 1837. I guess 40 something. So I was off too. I feel like we should have gotten that.
1851. All right. Well,
we can cut that part.
Well, Greg Walker, you did win, not due to my efforts, but to Luke. So good job, Luke. Thank you, Renovo Financial, for sponsoring our Chicago Fact. So awesome episode, Luke. Thanks for coming back and hanging out with us. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, like we talked about earlier, go to our straightupchicagoinvestor.com and check out our local meetups. We're going to update it. We just updated it. This is probably airing in the new year. So we've already updated it, and we'll have a whole bunch of new meetups and then update all the existing ones that might be transitioning from Zoom to local or kind of doing a hybrid version. So listeners, check that out. Thank you again, Luke. Thank you, Tom, and listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.